She first noticed the stone before noticing the cold. It lay near her boot, pale under the fading mountain light, as if it had been waiting for her to bend down and see it. Her dog, a lean German shepherd with winter in her eyes and a calmness older than the hills, nudged the stone closer with the tip of her snout. The woman exhaled, slow and tired, brushing wind-tangled hair away from her face as she crouched. She thought it was just another rock, another mountain gift, harmless and silent, carrying no promise except weight. The shepherd's tail moved once, a careful sweep across the dirt, letting her know this wasn't random. She picked up the stone, turning it between her cracked fingers, feeling its unusual smoothness beneath a grime. It had a strange inner gleam, almost like something trapped within it wanted to breathe. The woman frowned, sensing there was more to it, yet refusing to trust her curiosity. When you've lived alone in the mountains long enough, curiosity becomes a dangerous luxury, something easily confused with hope. She placed the stone beside her tiny fire, listening to the soft crackle of damp branches trying to burn. The shepherd curled close to her, ribs visible beneath thick fur, and rested her head on the woman's knee. The warmth of the dog always felt like forgiveness, like quiet companionship that asked for nothing in return. The woman absently stroked the animal's ears, eyes drifting toward the darkening ridges. Somewhere in the growing twilight, wind threaded through pines like whispered warnings she had learned not to fear. When morning broke, sharp as shattered glass across the valley, another stone waited outside her shelter. This one smaller, darker, with a strange weight that pulled at her palm. The shepherd stood beside it proudly, ears perked, tail high in a rare show of joy. The woman brushed frost from her blanket, rubbed swollen hands, and picked up the stone with a sigh. "Again, girl?" she murmured softly. The dog leaned into her hip, determined, as if carrying a message she couldn't yet understand. Days passed, and every sunrise brought another stone. Some were rough, others oddly luminous, but all held something captivating she tried to ignore. The shepherd found them with uncanny precision, always placing them gently near the fire pit, or beside the entrance to the woman's tarp-covered shelter. She wondered if the dog sensed something buried beneath the soil, or if loneliness had driven her companion to bring whatever she could find just to share something, anything meaningful. The woman accepted the stones, though unease slowly tightened inside her. By the 6th day, the pile had grown large enough to force acknowledgement. The woman sat before it in stiff silence, legs crossed, shoulders hunched, studying the shapes and colors. They reminded her of memories she didn't want, memories of jewelry she once wore before life hardened around her, memories of choices that led her far away from warmth and belonging. The shepherd rested beside her, watching her face closely, as though reading emotions she herself tried to deny. The woman inhaled deeply, wishing she didn't feel that flicker, hope trying to rise again. As evening settled over the mountains, the woman rubbed one stone with a damp cloth, wiping away dust to reveal a glittering interior. A shiver shot through her. These weren't ordinary stones. She had seen something like this once during a brief job at a mining outpost years ago, when she still traveled among people and trusted her place in the world. She whispered, barely audible, "No, this can't be." The shepherd lifted her head, sensing the shift, amber eyes narrowing with alertness that mirrored the woman's fear and reluctant wonder. That night, she barely slept. The mountains creaked and sighed around her, old bones shifting under the weight of wind and time. The shepherd lay awake too, ears flicking at every distant sound. The woman's thoughts curled tightly, circling the stones like wolves around a camp. If these were what she suspected, if they truly held that impossible value, then nothing about her quiet existence would remain safe. Riches don't bring peace. Riches bring attention. And attention was the one thing she could not afford, the one thing she had fled from. Before dawn painted the sky pale gray, she rose and walked toward the stream, where the dog usually found the stones. Frost clung to the ground, sparkling like ground stars beneath her boots. The shepherd trotted beside her, steps light but determined. The woman felt her heartbeat thud against her ribs with each cautious step, fear mixed with disbelief. She followed the dog across a narrow ridge, past the fallen pine she used as a landmark, until the shepherd stopped abruptly and looked back, inviting her to see what lay ahead. At first she saw nothing but earth, moss, and stone. Then the light shifted, revealing a shallow indentation near the base of a boulder. The shepherd pawed at it gently, tail low, not in excitement this time, but in something closer to urgency. The woman crouched beside her and brushed dirt away with trembling fingers. Beneath the soil, small fragments of stone gleamed faintly, half buried, but unmistakable. Her breath hitched. This wasn't luck or accident. Something valuable, something hidden, was slowly revealing itself through her dog. Returning to camp, she arranged the stones in a small circle, unable to resist examining them more closely. The shepherd watched her, every movement, occasionally nudging a stone into better view. The woman whispered to herself, piecing together old knowledge she had long pushed away. She recognized the structure, the crystallization patterns. She recognized the rare shimmer that suggested something worth more than she could ever imagine. Her hand shook as she lifted one of the brighter stones, feeling its weight, not just physically, but symbolically, like a future pressing itself into her palms. The memory came unexpectedly. A man's voice from years ago, the geologist who once hired her, explaining how certain stones formed deep in pressure and darkness, how they surfaced only by chance or by disturbance of the earth. She remembered how he handled samples with reverence, as though they were pieces of time itself. She swallowed hard. The stones her dog brought weren't common minerals. They were precious, likely valuable enough to change someone's life. But change, in her experience, was never gentle. Change had teeth. The shepherd curled beside her, nudging her hand as if urging her toward a decision. The woman looked into the dog's eyes, seeing an intelligence that always unsettled her a little. Too perceptive, too knowing. She wondered what the shepherd expected her to do. Keep the stones? Hide them? Leave them untouched as if pretending ignorance might keep danger away? She pressed her forehead against the dog's, grateful for the silent comfort. The warmth steadied her, though uncertainty still weighed heavily on her chest like unfallen snow. As shadows lengthened across the mountains, she noticed something else. A faint, metallic scent clung to some stones when broken apart, another sign of their value. Her pulse quickened. She imagined what would happen if word reached outsiders. Strangers would come, The peace she fought so hard to preserve would shatter. She had fled the world to escape turmoil, yet now the mountain itself seemed to push her back toward it. She traced her thumb along a stone, hesitant, torn between instinct and necessity. The night wind rose, rattling branches and echoing through valleys like distant warnings. The woman sat by her fire, staring at the dog. The shepherd watched her right back, expression unreadable but loyal. "Why bring them to me?" she whispered. The dog tilted her head slightly, as though considering the question in her own quiet language. The woman felt the weight of solitude then, the weight of being the only human here, trying to make sense of something that didn't belong in her world of survival and silence. By morning, she made tea from pine needles, steam swirling like ghosts around her fingers. She held one stone near the firelight and felt certainty settle uneasily into her bones. These were precious gems, or close enough to be dangerous. She looked at the shepherd, who sat patiently, as if waiting for her to accept what she already sensed. The woman closed her eyes for a long moment, breathing slowly, letting the truth root inside her, whether she wanted it there or not. Something had to be done. She contemplated traveling down the mountain to the nearest town, imagining the long walk, the cold, the questions people would ask. She imagined eyes studying her, noticing her ragged clothes, her unkempt hair, her dog who looked both fierce and starved. She envisioned the suspicion, the pity, the judgment she had worked so hard to escape. The thought made her chest tighten, but she also imagined the danger of doing nothing, the possibility of someone else finding the stones and taking advantage of her isolation. That afternoon, the shepherd brought another stone, placing it gently at the woman's feet. This one gleamed brighter than the others, almost unnervingly beautiful. The woman picked it up and held it to the sunlight, watching it refract faint, trembling colors across her palm. A soft gasp escaped her. This wasn't just valuable. It was priceless. She felt the world shift slightly under her, as though the ground understood the significance even before she fully did. The shepherd pressed against her leg, grounding her as panic fluttered in her chest. Her thoughts spiraled. Precious stones meant wealth. Wealth meant suspicion. Suspicion meant intrusion, danger, maybe even violence. She rubbed her temples, frustration and fear colliding. She didn't want riches. She wanted safety. Silence. A life without the heavy eyes of others judging her scars and choices. Yet the stones kept arriving, as if the mountain were insisting she face something she had buried long ago. She touched the dog's fur, drawing strength from the steady heartbeat beneath it. That evening, she climbed a nearby ridge with the shepherd at her side, hoping the open air might clear her thoughts. The valley stretched below like a vast, quiet ocean of shadow and silver light. Her breath fogged in the cold, drifting upward like fading prayers. She held one stone in her hand, its glow soft in the dark. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she whispered to no one, not expecting an answer. But the mountains felt watchful, like they had been waiting for her to ask. When she returned to her shelter, she placed the brightest stones inside a small pouch she had sewn years ago. The fabric felt fragile now, strained by the weight of its contents. The shepherd watched her intently, ears angled forward. The woman's decision formed slowly, painfully, like ice thickening overnight. She needed to know the truth. She needed confirmation, even if it meant facing the world again. She wrapped the pouch in a scarf and held it tightly, heart pounding with dread and reluctant determination. She tended the fire one last time before bed, feeding it scraps of broken branches. The flames cast trembling light across her face, revealing lines carved by hardship, loneliness, and long winters spent hiding. She stroked the dog's head. "Tomorrow," she murmured. The shepherd closed her eyes, resting her muzzle on the woman's knee. The quiet settled heavily around them, an uneasy calm, the kind that comes right before something changes forever. The woman stared into the fire, unable to sleep, knowing dawn would demand a decision she could no longer postpone. When dawn came, she packed a small bundle of essentials: dried roots, her old blanket, the pouch of stones, a rusted knife. She felt exposed, vulnerable, stepping out of the life she had clung to for years. The shepherd stayed close, sensing the shift in her energy. The woman breathed deeply, feeling a familiar tightness in her chest, fear disguised as resolve. She looked at the path leading down the mountain, then back at her shelter. Everything she owned, everything she was, seemed suspended between past and future. She took one cautious step forward, then another. The cold air stung her cheeks, waking nerves she had long taught to sleep. The shepherd trotted beside her, protective yet calm, as if trusting the choice she barely trusted herself. With each step, the weight of the stones in her pouch felt heavier, not just in mass, but in meaning. She didn't know what she would find in town, or what questions would rise, or what consequences would follow. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. The truth had already found her. She walked for hours, the path winding through towering pines and frost-bitten rock. The mountain seemed to watch her, trees whispering as she passed, as though gossiping about her recklessness or courage. She couldn't tell which. The shepherd stayed ahead sometimes, scouting the trail, then circling back to nudge her forward gently. The woman focused on her breath, on keeping her thoughts from spiraling. She repeated to herself that this was necessary, that hiding from the truth wouldn't erase it. The stones existed. Their worth existed. And ignoring them wouldn't keep her safe. By midday, she reached the base of the mountain, where the path widened into a clearing she hadn't visited in years. The sight of open space made her uneasy. She tightened her grip on the pouch, feeling the stones shift inside. She paused, hesitating, wondering if she should turn back. But the shepherd nudged her leg firmly, urging her onward. The woman exhaled shakily. "All right, girl," she whispered. "We keep going." And so she did. Toward the town, toward the world she had abandoned, toward an answer she feared but desperately needed. By the time she reached the outskirts of town, her legs were trembling, and the shepherd stayed pressed against her side, sensing the exhaustion that clung to her like cold mist. People stared at her worn clothes, at her tangled hair, at the dog who walked with alert, watchful steps. She felt their eyes like needles, reminders of why she had left civilization behind in the first place. She kept her head down, clutching the pouch beneath her coat, feeling every instinct inside her begging her to turn around and disappear back into the mountain she understood. She entered a small roadside diner, drawn by warmth and the promise of a quiet corner. The shepherd followed tightly behind, ignoring the suspicious glances from a few customers. The woman slid into a booth near the back, trembling fingers wrapped around a chipped porcelain mug of tea she could barely afford. Her heart pounded, replaying every step that brought her here. She knew she needed to speak to someone trustworthy, someone who understood what these stones were. But trust was a fragile thing she no longer knew how to give. The waitress, a woman with tired eyes but a kind voice, brought a bowl of water for the dog without being asked. The shepherd lapped at it gratefully. The woman murmured a soft, "Thank you," feeling a small warmth spread through her chest, a reminder that not everyone looked at her with judgment. But kindness made her uneasy too. It softened the defenses she had spent years building. She sipped her tea, staring at the swirling surface as if answers hid there, trying to summon the courage to take the next step. After finishing her drink, she walked to the small police station near the town square. The building looked too clean, too official, too full of rules she no longer understood. The shepherd pressed close, sensing her hesitation. The woman took a breath, opened the door, and stepped inside. A young officer looked up, his expression shifting from formal politeness to curiosity. She swallowed hard. "I need to report something," she said quietly, her voice thinner than she expected. Her fingers tightened around the pouch hidden beneath her coat. The officer guided her to a small room, offering a chair she barely trusted to hold her weight. The shepherd sat at her feet, rigid with protective tension. For a long moment, the woman couldn't speak. She stared at the table, at the scuffed metal edges, at the faint scratches that told stories of others who sat here before her. When she finally opened the pouch, the stones spilled out like captured stars. The officer's breath caught. She saw the recognition in his eyes, and fear sliced through her like winter wind. He called for another officer, a woman older, steadier, with eyes that carried experience rather than suspicion. The second officer examined the stones carefully, turning them beneath the light. "Where did you get these?" she asked, voice calm but tight beneath the surface. The woman hesitated. Telling the truth felt dangerous, but lying felt worse. "My dog found them," she said finally, "in the mountains, brought them to me, every day." Her voice shook at the absurdity of it, but the truth hung in the air like something too heavy to deny. The officers exchanged glances, silent, tense, calculating. The older one asked more questions, the location, the frequency, whether anyone else knew. The woman answered as honestly as her frayed nerves allowed. She felt exposed, as if every answer peeled back. Another layer of the privacy she had fiercely guarded. The shepherd nudged her thigh gently, grounding her with steady warmth. When the officers stepped out to talk privately, the room seemed to shrink around her, walls closing in with the weight of possibility and consequence. When they returned, their expressions had softened slightly. The older officer sat across from her and spoke in a tone that held both caution and empathy. "These stones are valuable," she said. "Very valuable. But the way they're appearing, it could mean there's a deposit somewhere up there. It could be dangerous. Landslides, unstable ground, or someone else finding out." The woman's breath hitched. She had feared this. She didn't want attention. She didn't want conflict. She only wanted to understand what her dog had been trying to tell her. She was asked to guide them to the site. Panic rose instantly. The thought of strangers climbing the mountains she called home felt like a violation. Her sanctuary, her silence. It could all unravel. She looked down at the shepherd, who met her eyes steadily, as if reminding her she wasn't alone. The woman clenched her jaw. She knew she had no real choice. If she didn't cooperate, someone else might search anyway, but without care, without understanding the fragile balance of that land. They arranged transport, a four-wheel drive vehicle, supplies, emergency gear. The woman stood outside the station, shivering despite her layers. The officers treated her carefully, respectfully now, as though realizing she had carried a burden heavier than she knew how to name. The shepherd stayed close, ears forward, gaze alert. The woman felt the mountain's absence like a missing limb. She had only been away for hours, yet she longed for its quiet breath, its protective solitude, its familiar embrace that never judged her fragile, human spirit. The journey back began in silence. She sat in the back of the vehicle, fingers twisting the hem of her sleeve, the dog resting her head on the woman's lap. The officers asked gentle questions about her life in the mountains, but she answered only with small, guarded truths. She wasn't ready to reveal the deeper wounds that had driven her into isolation. The officers didn't push. The road wound upward, hugging cliffs and dark forests, until the air grew thin and sharp again. With every turn, her anxiety coiled tighter. When they reached the trailhead, the woman stepped out cautiously, inhaling the familiar scent of pine and cold earth. The mountains felt alive again, watching her return with a mixture of relief and warning. She led the officers up the winding path, her feet knowing the way even when her mind faltered. The shepherd walked ahead, occasionally looking back, as if making sure everyone followed. The woman sensed the tension building inside her, each step bringing her closer to the place where everything had begun. As they approached the shallow indentation where the dog had first led her, the officers slowed, studying the terrain. They crouched, brushing aside leaves and soil, revealing tiny shimmering fragments that confirmed her story. The woman stood back, arms crossed tightly, feeling oddly protective of the mountain's secret. The officers murmured among themselves, noting the signs of geological disturbance. They spoke of safety concerns, potential surveys, controlled extraction. Each word pierced her, threatening the fragile world she had woven for herself and her dog. She stepped forward suddenly. "Stop," she said, voice trembling but firm. The officers looked up. "This land is dangerous," she insisted. "It changes, shifts. It's not safe for machines or strangers who don't listen to it." The older officer met her gaze, understanding the deeper meaning woven between her words. "We're not here to destroy anything," she said gently. "We're here to make sure you're safe, that no one tries to take advantage of you, that you don't end up hurt." The woman swallowed hard, torn between instinct and reason. A gust of wind swept through the trees, carrying faint echoes of the past. The woman closed her eyes briefly. She knew what the officer said was true. Wealth attracts danger. Secrets attract thieves. And she had no power to protect this place alone. Slowly, painfully, she nodded. The officers relaxed slightly, reassessing the scene with newfound caution. The shepherd circled the group, sniffing the ground, tail lifted in subtle agitation. Something in her posture made the woman uneasy, as if the dog sensed more than they did. Then the dog stopped, pawing at a patch of soil several meters away. The woman hurried over, heart pounding. The officers followed. When they crouched beside the disturbed earth, they found not stones, but a narrow, freshly exposed crack in the ground, as if the mountain itself had shifted recently. The woman's breath caught. The dog whined softly, ears pinned back. The officers exchanged tense glances. "This could collapse," one murmured. "She's right. This isn't stable terrain." Fear rippled through the woman. The mountain wasn't offering wealth. It was warning them. They backed away carefully, assessing the widening fracture. The woman felt her knees weaken. If she hadn't called for help, if she had continued exploring alone, she and her dog might have fallen into whatever void lay beneath that crack. Gratitude and terror twisted inside her. The older officer placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing, calling us," she said softly. "This could have turned into a disaster." The woman nodded shakily, feeling the truth settle heavily. The stones had drawn her here for a reason. Back at camp, the officers marked off the unstable area, planning to notify geological experts. The woman watched them work, heart aching with conflicting emotions. Part of her feared losing the solitude she cherished. Another part finally understood that survival sometimes required connection, even when it felt risky. The shepherd sat beside her, leaning into her side, grounding her trembling thoughts. She stroked the dog's fur, whispering, "You saved me again, girl." The shepherd gave a small, contented sigh, as if acknowledging a duty fulfilled. The older officer approached her gently. "You're not in trouble," she said, "but we need to make sure you're safe. And if these stones are as valuable as we think, you deserve protection, not fear." The woman looked down, unsure how to accept care after years of living without it. The officer added, "We can help you find a place to stay while experts examine this area. You won't be forced into anything, but you don't have to face this alone." The woman felt tears sting her eyes unexpectedly. She whispered, "I don't know how to live anywhere else." The officer gave a quiet, empathetic smile. "Then we'll take it slow, step by step. You're not losing the mountain. You're just gaining options." The woman took a long breath, letting the words settle. Options. A life not defined by fear. A chance to begin again without hiding. The shepherd bumped her hand with her nose, encouraging her gently. The woman finally nodded, a fragile yet unmistakable agreement blooming inside her like a hesitant promise. As the officers packed their equipment, the woman stood at the edge of the clearing, watching the mountains shift in the late afternoon light. The land she had clung to for so long no longer felt like a prison of isolation. It felt like a guardian that had guided her towards safety through the loyal instinct of her dog. She placed a hand on the shepherd's head, whispering a soft, grateful, "Thank you." The dog leaned into her touch, calm and steady, her silent promise of companionship unchanged. When they started the journey back down, the woman walked with a little less fear, a little more strength. Her life was changing, uncomfortably, unexpectedly, but maybe not painfully. She didn't know what awaited her in town, whether she would accept help, accept shelter, or find a way to balance solitude with safety. But she knew one thing with certainty. She and her dog had saved each other, again and again. And this time, help had arrived before tragedy could. As the path widened before them, she breathed deeply, ready at last to face whatever came next.